Mrs. Johnson, we're going to pivot now to your upbringing, and I want you to just tell about what it was like growing up here in Person County, and then tell your side to some of that story that he has told.
All right. I was born here in Roxborough, and both my parents were raised here. My mother was a J. She was Bessie J. J-A-Y, and she married Austin Roosevelt Lee Sr. And as I said, they both were raised here. Her parents were Ruth and Tommy J. And his parent, uh, let's see, was Ambrose Lee Sr. And I was named after my grandmother, Helen. Her name was Helen. And she deceased. She's deceased. She died when my dad was 13 years old. Okay. And my grandfather married Emily Lee, Emily Matthews. She was a beautician here. I think she was the first black beautician here that opened up a business here. So he remarried and married her. And so I didn't know my grandmother Helen, but so Emily was the grandmother I was raised with and knew. Okay. But anyway, my dad, they both went to school here, and my parents, they met when they were, well, they knew each other, but they actually started dating when they were juniors in high school. So they've always been known, they graduated in high school in 1948. So they were always known as sweethearts in their class because they were high school sweethearts. They got married and in 1950, I believe. And my dad went to A&T, so he's a graduate of A&T. He also was a member of the ROTC program at A&T. So when he graduated from A&T, he came out as second lieutenant in the Army. So he made a military career in the Army. Let me go back a little bit to his dad, my grandfather, and people knew him as Bud Lee. He ran I come from a history of entrepreneurs, and he ran a beer garden, they used to call it, but where they had food and, a business. It was on Depot Street. And my grandmother, Emily, she was a beautician. So she had her shop next door, and then my grandfather also had a barber shop. So that was the family business, and that's what my dad grew up with that, them running that business. And like I said, my dad was in the Army. So shortly after he graduated from A&T, they left here and went to Alabama with me. I was born in 1953, okay? And so we went to Alabama, and we've traveled up and down the East Coast. I'm the oldest of the four children. There's four of us. It was me, and then my brother, Austin Jr., who's now deceased. And then my sister, Paula. And then I have a younger brother who's Todd, Patrick Todd, and he currently lives in Florida, and my sister is here. But anyway, that was my upbringing, going in and out of Person County, in and out of Roxborough. We traveled with our dad, all up and down the East Coast where he went, different bases and things. We've been in we were in Fort Dix, we were in Harrisburg, we were in South Carolina, Fort Jackson for a while. Not in that order, but, and when we couldn't follow him, we came here. So when he was in Korea, for example, we were here. So I was in school, I went second grade here. I was here for a while. In the meantime, I was in Germany, and So came back here for 7th grade, I believe, and left again. 9th grade, we were back. By then, my dad was, the Vietnam War had started, and so he did 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. So from 9th grade until I graduated from high school, I was here. Okay. So I've been in integrated situations since I was very young because my dad was a military officer. So we were on base, and so everything was integrated. The military was integrated back in the 50s. So I've been in integrated situations. But when I came back to Person County, of course, I was in segregated situations. So I was in and out of that world as well. When I came back in 9th grade, I could have gone. At that time, it was like school of choice, I think, where you could have gone, but I wanted to be with my friends, and so I was glad to come back. And if segregated, I didn't think of those terms. I figured when I was away, I was in, I'd be the only black in the class, so to speak. So when I came back, I was glad to go to Roxborough Elementary and Person County High School. So that's how it kind of went. And then when we got to integrated here in my junior year, that's when, I think in 68, that's when integration began here. And so then I graduated from Person Senior High at that time in 1971. Then I went to A&T for 4 years and then graduated, came back. I graduated a semester early, and that's where I pledged. Delta was at A&T with the Alpha Mu chapter on A&T's campus. But I graduated a semester early, came here, and I worked. At that time, they had what they call the CETA program, where you could work at different places. It was a government kind of program. So I worked at Department of Social Services. I had graduated with a BS degree in psychology. So I came here and worked at Social Service in the food stamp program. So I worked there, 75, 76, 77. And 77 is when I met Pastor Johnson. Now, it was a mutual friend I worked with. She was a cousin of his. And she had told me, I knew after I worked there for a while, I know exactly the person for you. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. So she left me alone. So a year later, she came back. She said, look, I still know the same person. And I told her, I said, well, don't let them know. Just let chips fall where they may kind of thing. Don't talk to them or nothing. Well, little did I know, we met that night. We talked. I didn't know if he knew anything. I'm assuming that he didn't.
I did.
But I found out later, which after we married, that he did, knew more than I thought he knew. Anyway, we went out, we started dating. That was the end of March. Somewhere.
Well, July, maybe.
No. It was in June because my grandfather passed away. My mother's dad had passed away June the 14th of that year. And he had already asked me to marry him.
Mighty quick.
By then. And I wanted him to meet my grandfather, so I took him over there. And what I found out that his grandfather and my grandfather knew each other and used to go to the Masonic meetings together. And so I felt good about that. I felt like my grandfather was approving of him, had approved of him. And so my grandfather passed away, and he was very supportive during that time. And so I thought, he has potential,